Alright guys, before today's episode, just a quick reminder that we are on Patreon. For as little as £3 a month, you can sign up and get access to an extra episode every 2 weeks, plus bonus content, including from all our live shows, guys. Isn't that right?
100% correct, Mark, there. Good points, well made.
Yes.
There's also...
Steve, by the way, every time we do this, Steve sounds like he is an AI. Yes, we have something on.
Just trying to inject a bit of personality into it, you know, by not
having one.
not having any personality.
Right.
There's also other great things on the Patreon.
Well, the other thing we
Yes.
really need to plug, Stuart, is what?
My Soho Theatre run.
Well, yes, that.
1st to 2nd of July, I'm at Soho Theatre in London. Please, for the love of God, if you live in London, come out and see me. Because I don't know how many of you there are. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to doing my show there. Love that for me.
And myself and Stuart are doing the full run at Edinburgh Festival. Stephen is also doing a couple of dates as well.
Partial run.
Yes.
Pussy ass run.
3 dates from last year, 3 dates from a whip from this year.
So hopefully see you all at those live shows, guys. Sign up to the Patreon, and as ever, enjoy today's
Yes,
episode.
please enjoy.
Enjoy the app.
Welcome to the Some Laugh podcast.
It could be like, oh, that was some laugh, or there was just some laughs.
Well, no promising all laugh.
No,
It's
there's going to be some.
some laugh. Thanks for joining us, Ed.
Pleasure to be here.
I should probably say at the start. So I guess this is a bit of a different episode for us this week. Obviously, the election has just been announced, and of course, we are not ourselves at Some Laugh a politics podcast. As everyone knows, we are a men's mental health podcast, and we always have been and always will be. But it's timed very, very well with the surprise announcement of the election last week by Rishi Sunak, because we're just arranging for yourself, Ed, to come on. And I now just consider you our Some Laugh political correspondent.
That's good. Is that a full-time gig?
Yeah, well, you know, maybe need to speak to your employers about that.
Or full-time, maybe not, actually.
But Ed Campbell of PoliticsJOE
Yes.
joins us. Thank you so much for being here, Ed. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Yeah, very good, man. So, how are you feeling post-election announcement? It's now the run-up to it on the 4th of July.
I think I'm excited more than anything. Someone asked me if I feel ready. And I said, well, there's no time like the present. Because it's kind of bored me a little bit in the past, 6 months, being people asking Rishi Sunak all the time, I think the election's going to be now. I don't think that's news. You know, when he's like on Sky and they'd be like, I think the election's going to be here. That's not news. It's just speculation. So It's here. Everyone's getting there. Everyone's in the trenches.
We know. And so a lot of people were asking, well, why do you think he did announce it for the summer? Because everyone thought it was going to be in the autumn, didn't they? And is it like just a case that he's just thrown in the towel and he can't be arsed anymore?
Yeah, I actually do. I genuinely think that's it. I think he's done. This doesn't suit anybody in the Conservatives. They didn't want so
because they all had their holidays booked.
They had their holidays booked. Like, inflation's come down, but no one's going to feel the effect of it for a few months. So, say the election's in the autumn, you might have a wee bit more money by then. I think Rishi Sunak is, I am done. I cannot be arsed anymore. Like, the timing of it, they announced the election on the day that they were advising people to stockpile food. It's the most. It's re-elect us. You need to because you need tins of beans in your cupboard for some unnamed disaster. I think he's done because he's damaged his relationship with the party, the MPs. It suits nobody but him. I think the funniest outcome, I actually think, is if he wins. Because then you've got. I don't understand how he wants to have 6 debates with Keir Starmer. How can he, in good faith, stand up and be like, I really want to do this job still. I'm having the time of my life. Yeah,
I know it's a weird sell for him, isn't it? And I just wonder, because they were saying all that stuff about like if they lose the election now, it's got time because he can go back to California and then put his wains in school and all that stuff. But you just that's sort of like one of those things. Like, it feels like the Tories been doing that for ages, where like internal sort of arguments and wee beefs. So like, if he's pissed off at a lot of the members, he's like, they're almost doing it out of spite. I'm going to call the election, fuck yous. It's like the things that Boris done and all that sort of stuff. And it feels like that's the way the country's been ran for so long.
It's vindictive. It's a personal gripe. But then also, like, they've been behind the polls for so long.
Yeah.
Just rip the plaster off.
Well, it's inevitable. It's like just delaying the inevitable.
Mm-hmm.
It was before this, wasn't it? So, so obviously when they announced it, it came out in the fucking rain, and then that guy was playing
Steve Bray.
So it's because I think I've seen this cunt kicking
Yeah,
about.
yeah,
Because
yeah.
see, whenever you wander around West, is he just there all the
He's just
time?
there. So he's also outside any kind of event. He's outside Labour conference, Conservative Party conference, etc. So
Just always playing music.
always playing music, and I'm not being like I had a really niche reaction to it. So it kind of, because I've interacted with him a fair amount, as in whenever at Conservative Party conference I stand outside and Vox Pop members,
Yeah.
and you're standing listening to it all day, and obviously completely respect his right to protest.
And what's his sort of bag? Like what's he trying to get at? Just
It's broadly just generally anti-conservative. Rejoin the EU.
Right.
I'd say that's it. I think he ran as a Lib Dem at some point. I think so. And there was quite a funny
imagine if he became the Prime Minister after this.
there was a bit outside, I think it was the Popular Conservatism Conference in that was in Westminster.
Yeah.
Which was just kind of like, that was like Liz Truss's gang hanging
That's
out.
right.
Jacob Rees-Mogg, he always walks out of these things because I think he likes the attention. He likes to.
I seen you. Was that when you interviewed? I seen you talking
I've
to him.
got him
aye.
a few times, but before that, I was walking behind Steve Bray and Jacob Rees-Mogg having a conversation, and Jacob Rees-Mogg was just like, "You're a failed Lib Dem councillor," which is maybe the most insulting thing you could call somebody.
It's bad when like you can get a proper burn for fucking Jacob Rees-Mogg in it.
But he's always there. So I've got like, I could, by the end of the day, I could be singing along to all his songs, whatever. And he plays like, if like Tory MPs are coming in, they play the Darth Vader music. It's twee. It is twee, but people love it. And like, my thought when he's playing Things Can Only Get Better as Rishi Sunak was announcing the election, my initial thought was like, he has no sense of occasion. The Prime Minister is going to the country, and then I thought, well, most people will be quite pro this because they only see him once every 5 years on the news. And also, in fairness, that was his
That's his moment, isn't it?
Woodstock.
Yeah, that's it. It was class. I know it's so wild that they done it that way. Like we're like, it couldn't have been any more disastrous. The announcement, eh?
No, it couldn't. It just showed. I don't know. It seems. I think people read into these metaphorical things quite a lot because so much of the coverage, because Westminster coverage is so exhaustive, so 24-hour. People read into these things, so there's something to talk about. Like, why was he in the rain? Well, he had to do it outside because he's not allowed to use the Prime Minister's official briefing room because it's party business.
Yeah,
that's why he was outside. And then they're like, why didn't he have an umbrella? I was like, people look like
Steve McLaren.
Yeah, people look like fannies carrying an umbrella. And we're like, it's disastrous. I was saying to a colleague last week, I think we're on our way to Canvey Island in Essex on the train, and I was saying, I actually think he would have looked better had Rishi Sunak taken off his suit jacket and been like more like, I think a wet shirt is a better look than
That's
like
true.
a sodden suit.
Because he's no bad shape, Sunak. You know, if you could see the abs.
If he had abs, imagine Rishi Sunak is absolutely cut.
He's shredded.
And just, I think that's a vote winner. He's quite a handsome guy.
Well, here's the one thing I have thought for a while about Starmer is because he's not a bad looking guy.
I think he's an attractive man.
He needs to get on the keto diet or something for a bit because he's just got that wee bit of plump.
But I wonder if he looks like your pal's dad.
Aye.
And I think that's the image. I think if he was skinny, people would like him less.
Jinx.
I think skinny's. I have a bias, obviously, but skinny people I think there's a sinisterness. Like Tony Blair was skinny. Dominic Cummings is skinny.
Yes.
I
But
think-
he's like Dominic Cummings is skinny that like it doesn't look healthy.
No, but I wonder they're trying to do this thing with Starmer where he's like, I'm just a normal guy.
Aye.
Because that's why he's at also football stadiums. Being
That's
like,
right. Aye, because they're not doing that on purpose. He's going to all these like shite stadiums.
Yeah, Gillingham and
What's
whatever.
the thinking behind that?
It's like, I'm a normal guy. I love football, and he's always wearing like a Harrington jacket and a polo. He doesn't look like a politician. He just looks like your dad.
Well, they made a big deal about the fact the other week, and he done that press or the speech, and he had the white shirt with the sleeves rolled up.
Yeah.
And it's so funny how like big a deal that. Oh my god!
And I'll be focus grouped to within an inch of it as well, which is it's so interesting. So micromanaged. It's all artifice as well, which is interesting. But I think the funniest thing about Starmer in football is he genuinely he loves, massive Arsenal fan, does play fives every Monday or whatever, and no one buys it. No one buys it in the slightest. It seems so, because seemingly like in reality, in like if you were having a chat with him, it'd be very personable, very funny.
That's what they say.
But into the media, he's like robot man. Yeah. Just
he's it's funny because I've got this. The thing I think about Starmer is like since he became Labour leader is he's kind of like when a team hire Jose Mourinho, because like you just ditch your philosophy, adopt all these like defensive, cynical tactics to prey on the opposition's mistakes, and then just win ugly. Basically, like he's parked the bus after he's thrown the left under it. Hasn't he?
I think you're doing a disservice to Mourinho. To be honest, I think. But
the other thing about Mourinho is no guarantee of success.
No, true actually.
Which I guess obviously Starmer's going to win, but like
I think Mourinho has a charisma that Starmer's maybe missing, and also he's what's the equivalent of winning with Porto, like winning with the Green Party or something like that.
I guess that's true. Because my thought was, in a way, probably a better football analogy is like Labour supporters are a bit more like Newcastle United fans, because they've been so starved of success for so long that they're willing to turn a blind eye to human rights atrocities that they might be complicit in, like let's just ignore what's going on in Gaza and just go in, but it's an interesting one with Starmer, because in a way, like I feel, see, particularly when he got in, before he started going back on so much, I was like, well, look, the game's kind of rigged. We've seen what happened with Corbyn and all that, and you kind of need to play it, and he's just playing to win. But it's depressing how, like, I think he's given up more than he necessarily needs to, and he's risking pissing a lot more people off than, that would normally certainly want the Tories out or want Labour to win. But I guess because he's just trying to win over all the Conservatives, basically, isn't he?
I actually think it's probably futile, because I was in Canvey Island, as I said last week. Canvey Island, as part of Castle Point constituency, is one of the safest Tory seats. It's 76.7% voted Tory last time. Wow. They're projected to win still, but they're projected to get like 38% of the vote share, something like that. And vox popping people there's like a cultural allergy almost to voting Labour. That's like, it's not what people around here do. And I spoke to one woman who she said she actually like very acutely diagnosed all the issues in this country. She had 5 kids, none of whom want to stay in the UK anymore. Her daughter's a nurse who can't afford childcare. She's going to vote reform because she thinks Starmer, as a barrister, doesn't know what people want. And also, she said, didn't he work for Jimmy Savile? And I was like, no, he didn't. Like, I was like, I feel like, because a lot of these things, when I do a lot of these vox pops around the country, and a lot of it is, quite often people say to me in comments on YouTube, like, oh, why didn't you argue? And I kind of think, my kind of attitude to it is, I don't feel it's my place to argue with you you're a member of the public, you don't necessarily have to be held to an account, you're not a politician.
Yeah.
I'm documenting what you believe. But that woman, I was like, no, he didn't. He did. He did not work. And she was like, oh, really? Oh, okay.
But it just shows you, because was it no like Boris sort of said something about PMQs about that?
When he was Director of Public Prosecutions, he wasn't, Jimmy Savile wasn't prosecuted. I don't actually know how much the DPP can influence things like that. But,
and I mean, he's hanging about with fucking Prince Charles and Thatcher and all that at the time. It's like, here, see your mate, by the way, we're keeping him in jail.
but also, like, that's what he's doing. All these all these things to appeal to really right wing English people.
Yeah,
and they all think, oh, I'm not going to vote for you anyway because I think you voted. I think you worked for Savile.
That's so funny, isn't it? Yeah. But that's the thing, is that like it's interesting with the people that like vote for reform and stuff, because I feel a lot of the time, and I think this is the danger of having somebody like Starmer, and obviously because we've kind of seen it before with Blair and in Brown, and then obviously in America with Obama and stuff, where it's like when basically like the person that's meant to bring the change and, you know, bring this positive thing after years of the Conservative government or right-wing government is like when nothing changes, the alternative only gets worse. And then when people feel like they've not got a choice, because I guess a lot of the Tories, particularly your Kemi Badenoch and all the right-wing mob, they feel that Sunak's no right-wing enough, and I guess that's his only option now is to kind of appeal to them. People don't feel Starmer's left-wing enough, so people are looking for alternatives, and if you're not being given an alternative from a left-wing point of view, all you've really got is people, the classic thing that's historically been done of like, blaming the other immigrants, whether it's been the Irish or, you know, Muslims or now it's like, people coming over on boats and stuff, and that's where the Reform Party come in. And I think the difference kind of in Scotland, like there is an alternative, there's been an alternative in the SNP who are like slightly more left than Labour, seem to have a lot, like, I mind when Corbyn was in charge of Labour, often like the stuff he was trying to suggest, the stuff that the SNP were already doing, or they were kind of voting that same way as him. Whereas in England, if you are like, you know, quite rightly dissatisfied with both of the mainstream parties, the only option of an alternative is like coming for, you know, when it was UKIP or Farage or Reform or the Brexit Party, new Reform. So it's like we feel a wee bit superior in Scotland sometimes, because I think, we vote, you know, SNP on the left, but it's like, but that's the option we've kind of got.
Yeah.
Whereas there's no equivalent to that of like a slightly more left-wing party in England.
I think the SNP is an interesting one, because I think the SNP, I actually kind of think there's a myth of the SNP in Scotland, and it's kind of echoed around the UK or people who don't live in Scotland, as in quite like Jacinda Ardern in New Zealand. There was a progressive woman in charge who was used as like, well, look, wouldn't you rather have Nicola Sturgeon than David Cameron, Theresa May, Boris Johnson, Liz Truss, Rishi Sunak?
Yeah.
And most people probably would say yes, but equally, the myth of the SNP, I think, was we are Scotland is a uniquely progressive country, more so than England, Northern Ireland, and Wales, which I don't really believe, to be honest with you. Like, as in, I live in England. Everyone's sound. I don't like but equally the SNP have done some pretty economically right wing things. Free ports in Scotland. I think there's they benefited from not being the Conservatives for a long time, and actually, I think this election you might see independence. It just isn't a priority for people at the moment. I think people now see a viable Labour Party that could win. Yeah. And would you rather be part of that versus having a strong SNP Westminster group who probably won't work with a Labour government? And I think that's it'd be interesting to see, and also the split with the Scottish Green Party and having Kate Forbes in the cabinet.
Well, that's exactly it.
The old SNP, the old SNP was like very conservative. It was like
Tories. A lot of people would call them.
The Free Church of Scotland very influential. I don't think independence isn't intrinsically progressive.
No.
Like you could just abolish taxes or whatever. And
I was doing a joke myself. It's like people, because I used to because that has been the sort of myth, as you say, and it was mainly like through the person of Sturgeon. Like, she seemed progressive. You know, they would all, and they do have pretty socially progressive views, and certainly the way that the MPs vote in Westminster and stuff, it's always the kind of, you know, voting for the right things, and even when it comes to stuff like Palestine and all of that. But as you say, I think when Sturgeon resigned and then he had that leadership contest and you had somebody like Kate Forbes, you realise, how many other of these SNP folk are like these weird kind of like...
And then Kate Forbes nearly won.
She nearly, I knew she's Deputy First Minister.
And so it's an interesting one. I wonder if the genie's out the bottle a wee bit.
I think probably, and because the joke I had in my act was I was saying, you know, because I used to think the SNP were pretty much all progressive, but turns out people want independence for all different sorts of reasons. Like, if you look at Alex Salmond, for example, he probably just wanted independence so he could turn Scotland into his own version of Jeffrey Epstein's island. Allegedly.
Mr. Salmon would deny this.
Yes, yeah. Well, he's been, he was vindicated in court or whatever. I don't know what happened, but no, I think that's in the Kate Forbes thing is an interesting example of that, and I do think Labour have kind of. It'd have been interesting to see what the narrative was in this election if Sturgeon was still there, because obviously the weaker the SNP are, it means that they can't do that thing that they done obviously back when it was Ed Miliband and they're like, oh, he's in Salmon's pocket and all that shit. So now the fact that they're likely to win more seats in Scotland means that, it just makes it a bit of a clearer path for them to definitely get in Westminster.
It's interesting as well because I think Glasgow is projected to be all Labour, and Glasgow had the biggest yes vote in the country.
Yeah.
So it's the decoupling. I think the independence support has remained broadly between that 45 and 55 thing for 10 years at this point. But the SNP vote is completely decoupled from independence. I think there's frustration from a lot of independence activists, whether you're a Scottish Green or a more progressive thing versus you're an Alba guy.
Yeah.
I think there's frustration because also the SNP are so long in the tooth. They've been in power since 2007.
I know.
I was 11.
Yeah.
Do you know one government in Scotland?
Do you know how John Swinney's got pure Craig Levine energy, by the way? He's one of the guys, he's just always been about. Actually. And then he's back and he seems like a decent guy, Swinney and all that, but he's just he is so pure 2004 coded, isn't he?
Did you see when he said he was I'm the most popular leader in Scotland? And you're that's a tallest dwarf situation.
He's the only leader in Scotland.
But he's his popularity I think is -3.
Is it?
Oh, it's not which is I don't know what Star Wars is. I don't know what Ross's is. I don't know what Andrew Cole Hamilton's is. But that's not. -3 isn't something to boast about.
No.
It's you might be you are the most popular by default. It's not like people are Swinney.
I know, but that's what's a bit sad about the fact that as you say Scotland and a lot of people like ourselves really and our friends and people we know from Scotland it does feel like everybody's pretty progressive and all that kind of stuff, and you do like to have that image, and then see when it's getting to a case of this Labour under Starmer what's been offered and the fact that that's what's going to win votes even in Scotland, you go, God, it's a bit depressing, and it's when they basically just agree to offer nothing. Then they win again. And I just feel especially after, obviously whatever people think of Corbyn, but with Corbyn and then Bernie Sanders in America, and then you had that kind of option of there's maybe something's going to be an alternative, and now we're just back to kid on Blair again.
Yeah. And then I suppose at the moment the Tories are depriving young people of things with the national service announcement and stuff like that.
What do you think of this conscription fucking thing?
I think it's first of all it's very funny. It's just an unbelievable
Did you see Starmer called it Teenage Dad's Army the day?
But so if you join the army you'll be paid. If not, if you've volunteered, what was it in the NHS or something, you give up 1 weekend a month, unpaid, whatever. I think there's. It's pretty well. It shows the Conservatives. I spoke to my grandmother about this yesterday. She thought it was brilliant.
Oh, of course.
she was like, oh yeah, unreal. But it's to appeal to an older vote. But also, I think that there's a real lack of recognition of the kind of the sacrifices that young people have already made. As in these 18-year-olds, they were at school during COVID. I'm of the generation that my education was not affected by COVID in the slightest, and I'm 27, so 27-year-olds and above were quite lucky to have no school, no uni, but buggered by it basically. Whereas 18-year-olds would have been from second to fourth year of high school. You're doing it on Zoom, and now you've got to join the army. Yeah, you're just being punished for.
And because it's probably one of the only jobs that will be left that you can even do.
You can't have AI soldiers.
This is what makes me just feel like the Conservatives are so full of shit when it comes to this thing, because they always go on about, we believe in personal freedom and the government shouldn't have any say in your life. They shouldn't be involved in your life. But by the way, we're going to send your fucking kids to the army. And it just shows you when they talk about personal freedom and get the government off your back and all that, all they mean is, we don't want to make rich people pay taxes. That's it, isn't it? That's all they mean.
And also poor people can't get a hospital appointment or a dentist.
Yeah,
or whatever.
Basically, fuck everything that's going to help anyone. The government should have no control in any, and no power we should just let corporations run everything, except from we're now going to make you.
You're compelled to go and fight in the
Crazy.
Ukrainian front line.
You know, but despite the fact there's so fucking drones and shit they're using anyway, it's like, what's the fucking like? But it's such a desperate fucking plea that, isn't it?
But then also, I think it was on Monday. There was a defence minister was like, "No, national service is absolutely there's no chance." And then on Wednesday, you've now got Johnny Mercer, who's on the record of being not in favour of it within the past month. Johnny Mercer being like, "Yeah, no, national service will be brilliant for morale, for people's sense of British national identity." It's like, if you're compelling someone to feel proud of being British, they're not going to be.
And again, because this is the thing, and all, what have the Conservatives gone on about for ages? Drag queens reading stories to kids in school. Now they want to brainwash kids by putting them in the fucking army. Like, it's so, the double standards is unbelievable. No. I did see, I think it was Neil Gibbons, the Partridge writer, says Starmer's already said he will not back away from like the Tories' plan to fucking nationalise service. Because I actually thought at one point, it's like Starmer might as well just come out and say, look, if we win the election, we're not going to kick Sunak out of number 10. We'll still sit in our opposition side of the government. I do also think as well, like, see, to an extent, I think, and I do understand this to an extent, but like, there is a certain person that probably, like, going back to the kind of football thing of like, you know, even if they know, and, you know, maybe even unconsciously that maybe Labour aren't going to change that much, they'll certainly do things for the better than the Tories been doing. But in terms of the effect they might have on a lot of, particularly kind of middle class Guardian reading people, it's more like just seeing their team win again. So it's like, see, just because now when you watch the old footage of Blair and Labour are on that government side of PMQs, I think people just want to see that the way that you want to see like your team's like colours on the ribbons of the trophy. Is that?
I think there's also as well, people hate the Tories now. Even people who voted Tory in 2010, 15, 17, 19. They're now like, so even if you voted for Boris in 2019, so you saw what happened in Partygate as your granddad alone in a hospital. It's an emotional thing now, because even if they say people don't like Starmer, which I don't know how true that is. I don't know, because people used to say that about Blair. People say, and then people did really like Blair. Up until various things happened. But it's an emotional thing of let's get these bastards, because you look at the past 14 years, everything's worse. What's one thing they've improved?
Absolutely.
Like it's absolutely, well, to their credit, gay people can get married now. Excellent. But that's great. But also, I can't get a doctor's appointment. There's no dentist in my area. There's roads are full of potholes. My child lost out on 2 years of education for they're on Zoom and they haven't caught up to their reading levels, things like that. It's pretty extraordinary.
Yeah, everything's for the worse, and for what fucking benefit, you know? Not to mention Brexit and all the rest of it. I wonder then, so what do you think a Starmer government will look like? What do you think they'll actually do? Because there's part of you that sort of hopes a wee bit, you're like, well, they're kind of offering so little, and like, because they're coming out and saying they've got the self-imposed spending limits, so which to me seems like a signal to big business and corporations, don't get spooked when we get in. Okay, it's new boss, meet the old boss, you know, sort of thing, meet the new boss, same as the old boss. We're not going to rock the boat here. But that then means, well, really, how much change can you actually expect? And my only hope is that they kind of say, we'll just pretend to not offer anything, and then when we get in, we can maybe do more than we've offered. How likely is that to happen versus probably not?
I think, well, they've got to do, they will do some things, and to be honest, I think anything will be
better.
An improvement. For instance, they're not going to do the Rwanda plan.
Yes.
And I think that's a net positive, isn't it? I think
totally.
I think they're not going to make 18-year-olds do national service.
Yeah.
I suppose these are kind of the absence of ideas, aren't they? And I think
again, it's the Mourinho.
Yeah. But even things like New Deal for workers, yes, it is massively watered down. The Green New Deal, it is massively watered down. They've rolled back on the spending commitments. But something is better than nothing. I think people are quite on the left. People are quite the left eats itself, doesn't it? If people aren't sufficiently left wing rather, people are so ideological, and which is completely fair enough. It's a completely valid political position to have, but I think you might be throwing the baby out of the bathwater slightly.
Yeah,
to be so vehemently opposed to a Labour government if you're on the left.
Yeah, absolutely. It's got. I mean, it's the thing. You've got to have them. You've got to have them win, but it's just then becomes a bit dispiriting. I think when like they're not going to change it, and the fear, I suppose, as well is like what comes next for the Conservatives, because probably they're going to. It'll be one of the people from more of the right of the party that will take over for Sunak, and then 5 years of maybe not that much changing most people's lives. And just feeling like it's the same old with Starmer. Again, that creates your sort of Trump scenario of like, do we get one of these right-wing nutters in?
I think you're right. And also, we've seen in Holland, basically, to the equivalent of the Conservatives started to kind of tack to the far right to kind of hopefully cut off the far right party at the junction. But all it did was legitimise extremely right-wing sentiment. Like, you saw the outcry of Farage.
Well, we're seeing it here with the immigration check, because even though they're not doing Rwanda, he's taking that seriously and saying about, we're going to stop the gangs and all this stuff, rather than just being like, well, look, we've got bigger fish to fry, kind of thing,
I suppose like the gangs are
as
awful.
Thing,
as in, well, the gang. So if you open up a legal route to claim refugee status or claim asylum in the UK, you stop the gangs. Like I went to a refugee camp in Calais.
Did you?
And it was horrendous. It was like you had to kind of walk along a train line, and then maybe about 500 yards, and it was kind of like in a forest, and it was just hundreds of people camped in tents. And the day I was there was quite a lot of media there, and quite a lot of aid people were there handing out food, water, showers, whatever. I speak to these people like, I walked here from Iraq. And you're like, gee, like it's horrendous, and there's all these the gangs are. There's no. Let's not pretend the gangs are doing someone a service. They're doing it off their own backs to get people to Britain for a new life. They're mercenary. They're exploiting these extremely vulnerable people who are paying thousands to like for the chance, and they might die. They might die on that crossing. They're not. They're overstuffing the boats, whatever. So crack down on those gangs, because they're evil. They're evil. They're vile. And if you open up a legal route to claim asylum to the UK, the market, the gang stops, basically.
Totally. It always seems to me with these things, though, like the immigration, like the boats thing, because a lot of people's perception is like, the reason why you can't get a doctor's appointment is because all these people coming here, rather than looking at what's really happened with like the underfunding in the NHS and all these type of things. It's the same way like when people used to go on about when Labour were last in power. I always remember people talk about these benefit scroungers, we need to stop these benefit scroungers, despite the fact that the people that are probably contributing the least to tax is again all these big corporations and stuff like that. So everyone, it's like that old Malcolm X thing, isn't it? It's like, the people in power will try and get us fighting amongst each other. That's not the quote, I can't really remember it, but something along those lines. But it's just to me, it's always interesting how people will always sort of need you. Like my gran's like that. Like she just thinks like that all these problems are where are these people going to go? And I guess it's a legitimate discussion to be had. But again, when the emphasis is there and not on a lot of these other economic factors and political choices that the government have made that have resulted in the public services all being fucked, basically, then it's just a weird emphasis, isn't it?
It's talking about like if people are talking about like refugees or migrants or immigrants taking up NHS appointment times, we should be cracking down on Australia, because that's where they're all going.
Aye,
that's what that's what I know. Lots of medics I went to uni with just go to Australia because they get to live in Australia and get paid better, and they don't have the stress. Whatever. That's what. There's no examination of why is there a brain drain essentially of our doctors. That's
Absolutely.
why the NHS is under such. It's not the only reason. No. One of the symptoms of the NHS being under such stress.
A lot of people have talked. We spoke briefly about the Reform Party. A lot of people think that they're going to take votes off the Tories in England. How big a factor do you think they're going to play in the election?
So, I'm a Reform cynic. I would say.
If you said voter at the end of that sentence, that would have been
I'm a Reform
exclusive here.
member, cynic, spokesperson, deputy leader, candidate. And I'm the Some Laugh endorsed candidate for the Reform Party.
They fully endorse the Reform Party.
They're kind of like, only in a few by-elections have they reflected their polling nationally. Farage isn't standing.
No.
Did you see Farage said I was going to stand as an MP and announce it next week, but I'm not. So kind of shite bag. Like,
yeah, totally. Why do you think he hasn't done it? Just because I seen something about he was wanting to go and campaign for Trump and
so I think it's interesting, isn't it? Because if he runs and loses, I actually think then, as the kind of the spectre of the reform, his president or something is his title of reform, because he's not the official leader.
Yeah.
He's on the gravy train in America, which is very lucrative to be on like the right wing speaking circuit in America. If you're a loser, Donald Trump doesn't like losers. He's not going to invite you to hang out at the inauguration.
But is he still kind of can ride on the Brexit victory?
Yeah, definitely. I think also as well, maybe it shows the hollowness of reform as a political project. If your main electoral asset, or the biggest name associated with it, isn't confident enough to stick with it, because you've now got Richard Tice, Ben Habib, I think is his name. They and Lee Anderson are the big. Lee Anderson's obviously much more well known.
50p Lee, is that what they called him?
So 50p Lee, I think.
So he was initially he was Labour and then he was Conservative.
He's a Labour councillor, I think, and then he went to the Tories, and then is now Reform. And so they're the only three people with any kind of like name recognition in the UK. But even then, like most people probably couldn't.
Lawrence Fox, is he still?
Do you know he's
part of them now?
He's Reclaim. He's got a separate party. There's a separate party. Right. He's got his own party.
I thought that was the same one, but fucking hell.
I might just headbang. I think maybe the difference is Reform believe in vaccines.
Right.
I think that's probably the difference.
Well, that's going to split their vote.
Reform can see their kids. That's maybe the difference.
Reclaim their kids. It makes sense now. It makes sense.
Reclaim my parental visitation rights.
The custody party.
It's just Fathers for Justice now. But I think I think they will take some seats, particularly in places like Canvey Island, where that woman said, "I was going to vote Reform for change." I would be surprised if they achieved like UKIP levels in 2015 or things like that. I think I would be quite surprised, because I think as an electoral organisation or electoral force, I'm not sure they have anything set up in terms of like party mechanisms, local members. They have. Was it earlier this year? One of their prospective parliamentary candidates was dead, and he was still on the list. Like if they're still trying to run dead people, then maybe that's what the national service should be. You just you just have to stand just for democracy's sake.
18-year-olds in 5 years,
Yeah.
And I suppose the other thing, kind of for the other side, in terms of like the threat to Labour from the left, people I suppose would put it, is like, so you've got like the Greens and obviously like George Galloway get in, and because a lot of people obviously are pissed off that Labour have been too backing Israel too much basically, and everything going on, and I think they were saying that's basically why Galloway won, because he was like a pro-Palestinian candidate. Do you think that that'll hurt them in any way, that the fact that they've not been, and even with like his Corbyn's obviously running as an independent in Islington North?
Yeah. I think it's interesting because Galloway, I would maybe.
Do you think he'll lose this time?
I don't. Maybe because that by-election was buggered because the Labour candidate, there wasn't a Labour candidate. There was he'd said something that was, I think it was anti-Semitic, allegedly anti-Semitic.
Right.
Or it was anti-Semitic, one of them. Or he. So there wasn't a Labour candidate. So it was Galloway won as a protest vote. It was a by-election, so people are more likely to protest.
Yeah.
Anyway, versus in an election, I think a general election, I think that's when people are like, okay, well now this is serious.
Yeah.
This is for the next government. I don't really know. The problem might be that among young people, pro-Palestine sentiment is like really front and centre. But I wonder where there are enough people who feel so strongly as to overcome feelings about the cost of living, or the NHS,
absolutely,
or things like that, and being able to if there was maybe a nationwide movement to do it. You've seen like there's local independent candidates have put themselves up to it in kind of more kind of with areas with larger Muslim populations. So I would be curious to see the strength of feeling, and obviously it's completely valid because I don't know, standing wringing your hands as people being murdered in their thousands.
Absolutely, and because the thing that occurred to me, because everyone's like very keen to kind of go like, oh well, you're just being so both sides about this, but then well, you know, it doesn't really make a difference to people living in Gaza. You know, what side are you know not stopping the fucking bombs from dropping and all that, you know. So it's terrible, you know. But I guess as you say, like, you know, you're only going to vote for, by no voting for them, you're only voting for something that's a bit worse. So, but I fuck knows, man. The other thing I'm always curious about is Lib Dems.
Aye.
Like, what is the fucking point? Do you know what I mean? Like,
Are the strongholds?
they are the Partick Thistle, aren't they? It's like, oh well, I don't really like either. You know?
I wasn't allowed to wear Rangers Celtic tops, so I'm a Partick Thistle fan. So I don't. They have like. I'm always curious to see like. I wonder if it's just people who weren't caught up with the urbanisation of Britain, or the the collapse of the Liberal Party in like the early 20th century, and just have never caught up to it. So I suppose if there's not a big base of workers ever in that area, then there was never the mechanisms of the Labour Party to entrench themselves there, because it's kind of like Tory. The Lib Dems are going to target a lot of Tory seats.
Yeah, because it's like a lot of these places in South East England where they're more pissed off with the Tories. It's probably likely that they would vote Lib Dem because you say there's a kind of almost an aversion to Labour and all that.
I think it's more. I actually think you're more likely to vote Reform in kind of Tory Labour seats versus Tory Lib Dems. They're more. They're quite twee. They're quite like quaint. I would describe. So I think a Lib Dem would be this protest vote, I think, in like Jacob Rees-Mogg's constituency in Somerset.
So is that who he's rural. Most likely to lose his seat to the Lib Dems?
I think so. I would have to check that, but I'm pretty sure. Like seats like that, it's like in like Cornwall, there's a big Lib Dem vote, basically, and so it's interesting.
Shetland, I think, have got a seat.
This is the stronghold in Scotland. It's so interesting.
It's probably just because of like one guy. You know what I mean? It's like
knows.
They all just know him.
Yeah. That's the MP. That's the MP. It was Tavish Scott he was a Lib Dem. I think he was the leader of the Scottish Lib Dems. But I think it's so funny all the Lib Dem stunts they do with like breaking down the blue wall with a big yellow hammer. They've called them the battle bus. They've called it Yellow Hammer 1 with Ed Davey standing on beside this big bus. No, I wonder what. It's interesting, isn't it? Like, I would love to sit down with a Lib Dem. I would love to. I'm sure this is achievable in my line of work. To be like,
I'm sure they're available.
There's been influx into my emails of what there's just find out what is it you like about the Lib Dems, because they've been quiet for 9 years.
I seen a thing on Twitter the other day, and it was like someone like putting kind of like funny like sort of election predictions, and it was one. It was like Ed Davey will become briefly like you know, known for something good, and then the other one is Ed Davey will become briefly known for something bad.
Something absolutely dreadful. I think there was I think it's all politicians. I think it's all politicians at Westminster are just a wrong text away from career being over.
Fucking, I know, it's crazy, isn't it? Like, and yeah, you would sort of like I bet he was better back in the day, and even like see we like Starmer kind of like following the sort of Blair path. Do you watch wrestling at all? Have you ever been into it?
No, I've not actually. Nah. Kind of like in primary school when your pals loved wrestling. I was like, me too.
Really? Well, I'm not. I just thought it was a wee guy, but you know that term kayfabe.
Yeah.
So like, I feel like the kayfabe's so broken now, because like in the 90s, you would get the information for what the news would report, the papers, all this kind of stuff. Now that everyone's on social media and stuff, I think there's like such more of a self-awareness that like it is all fake. Everybody knows it's fake, and everyone really discusses, and a lot of the political sort of narratives and all that are all about or the tactics, or that's an interesting storyline.
Yeah.
It's like they don't, when he makes one of the politicians make a speech about something, it's not really about what they're actually saying. It's like, oh, that's an interesting thing to try and convince people with.
Yes, it's like discussing. It's like the horse race coverage of elections is who is winning at this moment in time versus like what matters when they win. Like, for instance, something that people aren't really talking about is there's heroin in the UK is basically going to be, a lot of it is going to be filled with nicotines and fentanyl,
which is a
over the
big
summer.
fucking deal in America.
Yeah. So basically, it's because in Afghanistan the Taliban have really cut down on opium production. So in some regards, you might have to hand it to them. And that,
Right,
if that's a some laugh official position,
that's having a negative effect on us.
So heroin users will be using fentanyl or nicotine filled heroin, which is much stronger.
Yeah.
And so that's a public health crisis that's going to be happening. And I think it's actually quite sad because there's nothing to be, that's not an election winner, but it's something that whoever's in government is going to have to, there's going to be people dying, overdosing.
Yeah.
It's going to be an absolute crisis. And there should be a lot of, it's horrific. But it's a
Well,
combination
Starmer's really going to be Blair. He'll just invade Afghanistan again.
Bray open the bomb. Opium's the new oil.
You know,
George Bush
we need to
standing.
make sure we've got clean heroin in this country, man. Fucking, that's
Our,
a vote, innit?
our heroin supply has actually been contaminated. So we need, it's a really serious issue, and there's lots of things like that things be falling apart, and
Aye.
it's the stakes, I suppose. Right? People should be talking about what's at stake rather than who's. Westminster journalists are so. I think because the coverage is general elections are probably actually quite boring to cover. I suppose if all you can talk about is like what is the imagery of this speech, like Sunak standing in front of the exit sign, or like
The moron thing in Morrison's.
can't organise a piss up at a brewery, things like that. And so it's kind of a frustration I have with Westminster journalism because I'm not in the parliamentary lobby.
Yeah.
And a lot of it, I'm like, is this actually important that this person is given? This was like when do you remember the 5 families crap when they were going to mount a coup against?
Aye. Because they do that. Because this is the thing that was getting mentioned a lot post Brexit. The ERG.
Yeah.
Is that the Morgan? So what is that for people that really know?
That's the Europe Research Group, European Research Group. It was just this basically bunch of Tory MPs that were so vehemently pro-Brexit, anti-Europe, and they just kind of brought down Theresa May's government by voting against her deal again and again and again. And then, but there's groups like that. There's groups of Tory MPs across it, and they're talking about the 5 families of Tory MPs, which is a phrase that's never been used before, but it sounds good in a newspaper headline, doesn't it?
Aye.
And then, like, it was Robert Jenrick? No, it wasn't Robert Jenrick. It was Marc Francois was giving a press conference, and you could see, like, images of like Westminster journalists clamoring to get towards it. I was like, you don't need to listen to this man.
No.
Like you don't need to. There's so much more important things happening in the UK policy wise. Instead of it's not Marc Jenrick. I keep saying that. Marc Francois announcing that he's not going to do something. This man is going to be irrelevant in a year's time.
But he's one of these kind of crazy guys that fucking is good copy for people and clicks and all the rest of it.
Yeah, it's good clicks as well. And I also suppose PoliticsJOE probably has to take some cop for that, I suppose, because like we can kind of, because we clip a lot of parliamentary speeches and do really well out of it. And you can kind of, sometimes someone makes a really good speech, it seems very organic, that's brilliant. But sometimes people do things kind of performatively and you're like, that's cheap. You've done that to get clicks.
Yeah.
And then
stuff for viral content or whatever, I think.
Definitely.
But I would say though, like to be fair, it could be interesting to talk about PoliticsJOE a wee bit, because like what I like about you guys is that you, like, as you say, you're only part of the parliamentary lobby, and again, you're looking at things from a slightly different perspective and angle than like a lot of the mainstream journalists are, and in a quite refreshing way from my perspective.
It's interesting. Well, so my colleague Eva Santina is in the parliamentary lobby. She's the only one who is and has ever been. It's interesting. I think it's quite a healthy detachment to have, to be honest, because you can look at things you can look at something and say that's ridiculous, because you've not had lunch with that person.
Aye.
The day before. It's
client journalism, they call that, don't they? Or the example that you'll probably be familiar with in Scottish football is what they call succulent lamb journalism, because who was that guy, and was it Jim Traynor or something? He went for dinner with David Murray.
Oh, something like that.
And David Murray, and David Murray put on this big dinner for him, and he described the succulent lamb and all that shit. And that's basically it. And it's like, oh, you get a wee lunch with him and all that shit, and then suddenly you're more favourable towards him because you feel a bit bad because you've got a bit of a personal relationship.
Then equally, I think I read an article by a veteran Westminster journalist who said you build up all these relationships with contacts, knowing full well you can betray them at any point. Because if they told you something and they're going to, it's like I suppose I'm having never worked in that environment, I'm quite cynical of it, but there's some merit to the system.
Yeah. Well, you get access and you get your scoops and all
that. You
get
access, and then there's things like Partygate wouldn't have happened without the lobby journalists, etc. And they have to be prepared. They have to be prepared to be quite ruthless when the system goes well. But quite a lot of time you read an article and it's like anonymous source said something, and you're like, that's it. You haven't is that actually likely to happen? They say that Keir Starmer's going to making a refugee live in your house or something like that.
Aye.
And then you've just written it down.
And you're just basically doing their PR for them. Like they're just feeding you a line and you're just reporting it as fact.
Mm-hmm. It's an interesting one, because that's what I like about PoliticsJOE is it's fun, and you can get to be, because you end up people end up informed, because you kind of bring people in with my colleague, his name's Chris, but his stage name is Swede Mason. He does all those mashups to songs, stuff like that. So people see that, and like, oh, that's really funny.
Yeah.
And then they're watching a documentary about drug deaths in Scotland or something like that. So it's a nice balance of both, I think.
Absolutely. And you obviously have done quite a bit of those things. So for PoliticsJOE, you'll go out and I seen one, and you were at the most the part in Britain that's like the least white majority or something like that.
Yeah, the white that was in. It's in Cumbria. Oh man, my memory is so bad. It was the area with the highest percentage of white people. It was like 98 point something.
Oh, was it? Yeah.
Percent. And it's funny. You get to explore. I've gone all over the UK now to all these places that I wouldn't go before, and chatting to all these people about how do they feel about immigration, how do you feel about the oldest place in Britain about how to buy a house, stuff like that. No, it's good. You get to. I say a travel on on British Rail, on British Railways to places that you probably wouldn't go on your holidays.
Well, basically, it's a lot like being a stand-up comedian.
No, probably actually. I was staying in a Premier Inn.
So, what kind of what sort of standout moments have you had for first of all those kind of ones where you're talking to the public and going to these types of places?
Yeah. So one was in Leicester. It was the first place in the country to have white people not be the plurality of the population. I was speaking to this guy, and it's actually quite mad how often people talk to you, how frequently people end up just saying conspiracy theories to you. It's something I've noticed. It's completely anecdotally. It's quite often people are like, oh, they're putting chips in your brains or whatever, and you're like, no, they're not. Yeah. Anyway, but he said a line that, so he was quite right-wing, far-right guy, and he was talking about immigration. He was talking about people coming over in boats being military-aged men. And so he said it's an invasion. Back in 1066, that was an invasion. And you're like, how is this? That was an invading army. That was the Normans. Like it was like the Duke of Normandy invaded England and took it over. It's not like we guys from on a rib. Like it's not. They're not
a long-term plan, but in 1066,
Yeah. Oh, they did well. They won, to be fair. But that was very funny because people normally talk about World War II being like, we won. That was the Battle of Britain, whatever. But that's the first time it's been back to the medieval times.
Yeah. And do you feel like, see, when you go into because you must give you quite a good sort of like finger on the pulse at like where people are at in terms of their views and stuff like that. And then when you go back to London and you're in there around the Westminster bubble, as they call it, I guess like it's just a totally different world there. And a lot of people are at touch. But like, do you think that? What do you think is like the biggest thing that maybe politicians fail to understand about where people are in the country for speaking to them?
I think people, what actually kind of gets me every time is you go to a place, a small town in England, and more often than not, the high street is absolutely dead.
Aye.
Full of, there's betting shops, vape shops, charity shops, and that's kind of it. And it's all over the country. All these people, like all these former like bustling high streets, which would be like the heart of the town, are just dead.
Well,
It's
Clydebank's
dead.
a really good example of that
Yeah.
because it used to be shipyards
Yeah,
and
yeah.
they had the Singer Sewing Factory. And even the football team, like, see, when I was growing up, like, it was like, I think they just basically went bust when that, like, you know, a couple of years into the 90s. And it's like, it just feels like you're living in this ghost town.
Aye, it's brutal.
Yeah.
And it's also from like a, you should be proud of where you're from.
Yeah.
And you should like going into your town centre. Like, I remember in Cumbria, I was like, what's the best place about living here? And someone said, we've got a TK Maxx now. And but like, she was buzzing. She was absolutely buzzing because there'd been some investment into like a new business had opened.
Yeah.
And she was like, and there's like a children's choir festival at the weekend. She was excited for it. It was sweet. It was like really like living in London. Like, it's very easy to be like, that's quaint and twee. Like, I live 20 minutes from a TK Maxx, and
Yeah.
I've never thought about it. But it's all of it. I think that's the. It's just how frustrated. I think people are just fed up with walking to the high street and there not being anything for them to buy, anything for them to do. For young people as well, I think it must be brutal. Like, you think about why there's such a drug problem in this country? It's because like, fuck all else to do.
Yeah.
To be honest.
And the options, and in terms of like, you know, being able to get well paid work or to afford a fucking house or anything like that, like, it just seems so, you know, unrealistic for a lot of people now that you're like going. And then again, it's like, but what are the alternatives being offered by people, and what are the reasons that people are being, unless you know, you go to uni and you study it and you figure it all out, or you really get into, because even the news, like, it's like a lot of it's just today with the horse race, the politics and the theatre of it. They're never sitting and explaining to people these economic factors and all of the rest of it. So then what do people hear as an excuse? They don't get offered an excuse, except from, by the way, they people coming over here are taking your thingies away, and this is why everything's wrong, and then that's how we end up fucking in the situations that we've been in.
It's pretty brutal because, especially for young people, like everything. When we were you're like, I'll grow up, I'll get a good job, I'll get my own house, I'll get married, whatever, and that contract, we're going to be the first generation to earn less than our parents. The social contract is broken. I think it's actually quite a dangerous place for us to be as a kind of a generation. Is you're so like everything you've been told is just hasn't happened. Like the social contract's been broken. Well, COVID, you had to go to school locked inside. They're going to make you join the army. Yeah, whatever. It's a really dangerous. Angry young men is quite a really dangerous group. And if we're not careful, if they don't fix it, there's going to be a malevolent actor, someone like Tommy Robinson, probably not Tommy Robinson. Yeah, is going to come and channel all that anger, and it could take out on the other. Could be women, could be refugees, could be immigrants in general, could be trans people, could be gay people. Could
be all of them.
Seems regressive.
And that's what I'm saying about like what's going to come over the hill with the next version of the Tory party if we get just another thing of like, you know, in 5 years' time we've had a Labour government, great, but every fucking high street in the country's, you know, is still as you described, and the prospects haven't really improved for most people. And then you go, yeah, what is going to come with the next version of these, like, you know, these Tory people who are coming along and offering people these easy answers to complex problems, you know. But it's it's a really it's weird, and even as you say for ourselves and all that, like the prospect of owning a house and all these type of things. But I always feel like the politicians need to pander so much to the older generation who probably vote in the highest percentages, and that are have basically sort of escaped, like, you know, having to deal with the problems, or are just not really. Even if they are aware, like they've got grandkids and all that, they don't actually realise what it's like for people to try and own a house and how like unaffordable everything is.
I think that's maybe an uncharitable view of older people in terms of, like, they speak to their grandkids and whatever, and they'll know. I spoke to a woman in.
How much do they listen?
But there's one woman I spoke to. The clip went crazy viral. Of she was just like, yeah, what chance do these young people have? They're saving every penny. Like, especially people talk about young people, and I think it's maybe biased towards, like, I think of young person as like a young professional, like someone like me, like single. Yeah. But she was making the point about young parents. Like, what if you're on a pretty rubbish salary, you've got like 2 kids to feed as a single mum.
Yeah.
Scraping every penny. Like, you're not eating whatever. What chance do you have to get? You're not getting, like, you're living in temporary accommodation, whatever. You're not getting your own house, even like a social housing.
Exactly.
It's supposed to look after you.
I know, and as I say, that's the thing, that if it's just the longer and longer it goes on without really being offered any alternative to change it, like, I think the worst things are going to get. But I don't know. I guess we live in hope, don't we?
There was saying about angry people. I was at there was a Tommy Robinson rally in Westminster maybe about 4 weeks ago.
Why?
And I went to report on it. And you have to, like, when you try to vox pop people or interview people, especially at somewhere like that, very, very hostile to media in general.
I would take off my glasses if I was you at that. Try and fan. Maybe get the skin fade at the sides and all that. There's a group of, like, guys there, probably about my age, and one of them had red hair. And I go up to them, and so I had different glasses to these. I'd like round. It was a power move. Like, I'm the alpha in this group now. Oh, ginger!
So I had rounder glasses than I do now, and I was like, all right, lads, like, chat, trying to, like, build a rapport with them.
Uh-huh.
And this red-haired guy says, "You look like Harry Potter," and I went, "Haha, I get that a lot." Laugh, 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 laugh. Then I went, "You could be Ron." Atmosphere soured. He did not like that. Like, don't say that. I'm like, okay, I thought we were having a laugh. I thought we were having fun at the Tommy Robinson
Turns
rally.
out they only like banter if it's racist. Not against gingers.
No. That's the one thing that they're. They see ginger as a protected category, but but anything else. But yeah, that was an angry, and also in terms of England flags anywhere, and people talk about, like, Englishness and, like, English nationalism, and I kind of think if you leave these symbols of England to the far right, like, you need to be able to say you're English, be proud of being English, and England should be a good country, like country of Shakespeare, Rolling Hills, whatever.
Yeah, the Beatles.
Honestly, stuff like that. But after going to the far right rally, seeing the England flags everywhere, I was like, nah, fuck it, this is shite.
Yeah, totally.
This is a quite a damaging.
How often do you feel quite, like, scared when you're at these places where, like, it's quite clear that you're not one of them, like any of these conservative ones?
Quite rarely, to be honest, because we don't really. Only really the far right ones are you in any real sort of danger, I guess. But you just kind of have to keep your head on a swivel. It's more just like, don't do anything stupid. Yeah. Basically, don't, like, keep aware of the mood of the crowds, of the protest. Like, don't be. You have to be polite at these things anyway. Like, don't film any people without their permission. So me and my cameraman, it was a guy called Ollie that time. Like, he had the camera facing the ground. You have to kind of, until you agree to interview them. Yeah, stuff like that. So you can be savvy about it. Those ones are, like, hairy. There was one. I went to the protest on Remembrance Day outside. It was actually outside Churchill statue. We weren't on the main one on Whitehall, and some guy I'd done a bit on Talk TV the week before, and some guy came out like, "You were on Talk TV," and I was like, "Yep," and he was like, "Lads, he's great," because I got the Talk TV seal of approval. So that was, and then there was one time at the more recent one, I was talking to these two lads, and someone recognised me. Someone was like, "You're from Joe," like shouting. He's like, "You're from Joe. He's gonna make you look like a cunt," and they're trying to, like, they were being quite physically intimidating. Yeah. But the two lads that I was talking to, they'd taken a shining to us. So they were, like, sticking up for us. Like, no, they're not. So we had these two kind of protectors that were... That's pretty good. They were arguing about whether or not they should speak to us. And the guy was like, "You're not going to make me look like a cunt, are you?" I was like, "No." And he's like, "Great. Anyway," as I was saying. And then just keep on the rest of what he says. And he sounds like a...
how does that work with politicians then? Because obviously, as we say, like I'd seen you like talking to Rees-Mogg outside of that right wing meeting and stuff like that. So I take it with them, like they're a bit, because I'm on the public eye, you can basically you can sort of film them as they're trying to run away from you.
Yeah.
How is that? Like, because that's often like what people we see in the news, like whenever they're stunned at some politician's house or they're coming, like how. What are you looking for when you're interviewing them? Just try to get them to say anything, basically.
So it's more those things philosophically. It's more to be seen to have done it, I guess, rather than you're not really going to get anything concrete. Like, you know, when like broadcast news will go to someone's like, we've found out that this doctor surgery is actually a front for drugs, and then they go and knock on the door at the doctor. I don't know, nobody's in. Like, it's to be seen to be done.
Michael Moore, innit? He just goes up to the customer service desk at JP Morgan or whatever.
But he's because you're not going to, like, Michael Moore is not like going to get an answer there or something like that. Or when I think it was Minnie Stevenson for Channel 4 News doorstepped Dominic Cummings after his stuff in County Durham came out, and I remember her like, he's not going to answer her. It's like, but like it's to be seen to be doing it more than anything.
Yeah.
And you think you're asking, it's an opportunity to kind of get a politician to engage with you and ask questions, but also it's a spectacle.
Yeah.
It's quite cynically, it's a spectacle that people are going to see, and also it's quite I think they're quite fun as well. Things like that. I kind of like there should be an acknowledgement that it's kayfabe. It's like I'm doing something, you're doing something. And we're both going to get something from this.
If there's a story about whatever the scandal is, you can just show the footage of them not answering the questions. They try to get into the car or whatever. But I have seen, like, obviously with that Rees-Mogg one, he was giving you stuff. And is it the best when they do bite? And who's been the best for kind of doing that?
So Jacob Rees-Mogg actually will talk to you. He'll slag you off when he's doing it, but
because I seen when he was like, "Oh, you're lefty."
They don't want to hear. They'd rather hear from this, like they don't want to hear from your lefty outfit or something like that. But it's the more kind of consummate media performers that will engage with you. Jacob Rees-Mogg, actually, the first time I did it was outside Conservative Party conference in, I think it was 2021 in Manchester, and it just so happened. So I was standing vox popping this Conservative member, looking here, and just kind of the corner of my eye, I saw Jacob Rees-Mogg, and then I saw this man with cerebral palsy going ballistic at him, going absolutely ballistic, screaming about like disability cuts, whatever. And Jacob Rees-Mogg stood, I'd say, for about 5 minutes and listened to him. And so I was kind of like, then went into, right, this is something we've got. I'd said to the Tory member guy, like, sorry mate, we've got this. And I was then scanning, looking to see what other media were there, if any other media were there. There's a big crowd of people filming, and then Jacob Rees-Mogg walked away, and I just went with him. I was just like, I expected everyone to follow Jacob Rees-Mogg, because in my head it was like a pack of 100 journalists all fighting to get, but it's probably just like 15 interested passers-by, whatever. And then I asked him questions about that. So I think that's more like that was, I think that's my favourite in terms of, I think that is maybe the least redundant example of that, because he had been held to account by a disability activist about the Conservative record in government, and he was getting his immediate reaction. So if there's something like that, if you can get, this had just happened to him, and I was getting his real emotional reaction to that, and I just walked with him through Manchester for like 5 or 6 minutes.
What did they say?
He just backed up. He just kind of denied. He said, "We haven't, like, disability rights in this country are treated absolutely fairly." Just kind of like standard Conservative lines, but it was like it was a crazy thing to see and to capture, because these people who are so at the sharp end of the Conservative cuts to benefits, or like they talk about like there's been a real kind of lack of dignity afforded to these people. Like, I think it's got, like, you don't really see it as much now, but do you remember like maybe like 10 years ago you'd see like photos of like this is the paddling pool I have to wash this man I care for, in things like that. There's a real lack of dignity.
Well, where I used to work, where I picked you up today, across the road for there, we used to be where the DWP building was, and you would see everybody going in for their assessments and stuff, and it was always heartbreaking just seeing these people.
They're so undignified.
Yeah.
But that was it was quite incredible to capture someone it was just rage. It was just raw anger at this Jacob Rees-Mogg as the face of the uncaring Conservative government.
Totally.
It was quite extraordinary to see. And
Absolutely.
then, but then there was quite on a completely farcical level. I used to work. So Ollie Dugmore, my colleague, he and I were in a by-election in Batley and Spen in Yorkshire, and it was when George Galloway was actually standing in that seat. We spent the day with George Galloway, and we were trying to get time with the Labour candidate Kim Leadbeater, and we'd gone with, because Batley and Spen had such a high Muslim population, people were canvassing outside Friday prayers at this mosque, so we went with Galloway there, spotted the Labour crowd up there, so I was filming it, and Ollie says brawl. So he walks up to like the Labour gaggle and says, "Oh, can I speak to Kim?" And Kim said, "Oh, you'll have to speak to Marc." And Ollie's like, "Okay, so I'm here with you. You're telling me I can't ask you questions." And she said, "Yes." So then the next shot in the video is Ollie standing on the phone, to Marc, Kim speaking over her. Like you can see Kim over Ollie's shoulder,
Brilliant.
trying to get away from it. And then we spoke. Naz Shah, the Labour MP, was there as well. And she agreed to an interview, and mid-interview, Naz couldn't remember a fact or a figure about Batley and Spen. So he goes, "Kim, what was that?" And Kim says, "It was this figure." So she's contributing.
Can you tell him to pass the butter, please?
I feel like Kim had forgotten this. So she was like helping with his interview.
God's sake.
No, it's amazing how media managed these things are.
Politicians and stuff.
They don't, I suppose, because everything is filmed so much, they can't control these things. They don't want anything spontaneous to happen. So you do understand it from a image curation point of view.
And they don't want the thick of it.
They don't want any spontaneity.
Yeah.
Which I think is maybe to the detriment of political life in this country, that there's no characters.
Totally. That's the thing. And then if everything, like you're saying about like Starmer and stuff, it's just focus group to death. But I think people sort of instinctively can tell when that's the case as well. And I think there is there's a lot of talk about populism in the last few years with, various parties in both the left and the right. But I think it's because that people like a bit of, for want of a better word, authenticity, even if it's somebody that's an authentic liar like a Trump or a Boris, and it's an interesting one. I think see in terms of characters and stuff, like who has been your favourite people to interact with, or they gave you some kind of good stuff that or just a good laugh?
I think so. I met Bernie Sanders.
Did you?
And so Ollie, my colleague I mentioned before, he interviewed him. He's promoting his book in the UK, and we were saying before. So that was on a Saturday. And if Ollie was interviewing anybody on a Saturday, I wouldn't get out of bed to go and watch. But it was Bernie Sanders, so we were all there. It was in this pub called the Harlequin in Angel in London. It's a great pub if you're ever in the area. And we were like, "Oh, I wonder if you'll have security. I wonder if you'll have whatever." And no, he just rocked up at this pub with two PR women from the publisher, his wife. He came in and shook everyone's hand.
Wow.
And he was like, "What's your name?" And so he was like, "Call me Bernie." And so he, it was quite sweet as well, because his wife was taking photos on her phone of it, which in the Sanders family WhatsApp, like, "Oh, Grandpa's doing this."
It's not even for like the PR for socials.
No, they didn't take a photo at all. It was just like Mrs. Sanders was just taking lots of like photos for their. It was just sweet, because he's obviously like one of the most famous politicians in the world. Has a massive following, extremely influential, and just had no trappings.
That's great.
I thought it was class.
That's very cool. Do you know what's weird? I kind of stumbled upon this, to be honest, right? It was at the end of the Fringe last year, and I was going to climb Arthur's Seat.
Oh, yeah.
And so I was walking to Holyrood, I seen like a dad and his son was holding like a wee EU flag, and I'm like, people just coming here on a Saturday to do this. I was like, fucking get over it. Brexit means big. No, but I was just like, all right, is that what people do?
It was 8 years ago.
And then I walked around the corner, and it turns out there's a big fucking rally, right?
Uh-huh.
And so there's just loads of people standing about, and I was like, "Oh, who's like speaking?" And they're like, "Oh, this person, and whom's Yousaf?" So I was like, I'll just like stay and check this out, right? And then but he was speaking right outside Scottish Parliament, and right in front of Arthur's Seat, and I was just thinking like, that is a fucking sniper's dream. Like, you would never get like, you know, in America, or whatever. Like, but it's
The
like
top of
Scottish
what they
politicians
say.
are so
Yeah.
like, you know, because Sturgeon, you used to
So
always see her
accessible.
kicking about. They're
Yeah.
dead accessible, and you're like, it's just, I suppose, like they've, you know, nobody's really that arsed.
No,
but they
no.
could easily have got to them if they wanted. It just shows
No,
you.
no,
It's a
you're
bit
right.
surprising.
That is mad.
Yeah, don't use that to your advantage. Don't harm anyone ever.
Maybe
but
edit that part out.
Yeah, no, but I just always think it is always just surprising when you see them knocking about and stuff, and you're like, God, like, you know, you'd imagine there'd be a bit more protection. Maybe there is in the shadows, but yeah, I'd have maybe been checking. Like, I wouldn't have put it in that specific point.
You mentioned the EU flag there. I was once in a pub in London, and these two wee guys, I say they were 18, came up to me like, "Oh, are you from PoliticsJOE?" And I was like, "Yeah." And I don't know if you have this, but like when you imagine the Some Laugh audience,
Yeah,
but you probably think they're cool. You probably think they're like.
They are cool.
They are cool. You are. Sorry.
no, I'm always pleasantly surprised whenever we meet. No surprise, but I would always. People always seem sound.
Oh no, but as in like, but so.
And always, I always think they're
meant
about my age though as well. Is that maybe? Yeah.
But I meant. I think these are the platonic ideals of the PoliticsJOE audience. It was like two wee guys, sixth formers, ever like really, really lovely, extremely earnest.
Yes.
And one of them was wearing an EU badge, and I was like, "That's the audience. That's,
aye,
that's the audience
that's
we've
it.
cultivated." It wasn't. You know, they're not like I don't know. House DJs listening to it after a set.
But you know it's sort of sad in a way because do you know, I think in a few years, like you worry, you go, oh God, they're going to look back on liking us the way that
it's
people look back on
embarrassing. Oh, God,
liking
yeah.
razor lighters and shit.
Is that what you are to Scottish comedy?
I fucking hope not. We like to see ourselves as the Arctic Monkeys. We'll keep evolving and all that, you know. But
What's your album that everyone hates? Like,
I know.
you're gonna have two really difficult podcasts.
Let's hope it's not this episode.
Maybe actually, this is the jumping the shark episode.
But this is like, oh right, this Jennings has finally just co-opted it into the fucking political dialogue that I've always wanted.
Oh, you're not gonna get Stuart and Steve back at any point.
Oh
It's
no,
gonna
that's
be-
it. No, they'll need to resign.
or some scandal's gonna break that I've
stand down.
endorsed Paxton.
I know. Aye, but you know, can I just quell the rumours by the way while we're at it that you got your job at PoliticsJOE? It wasn't anything to do with your uncle Alastair. No,
Yeah, it wasn't actually. That's a.
he isn't actually your uncle by the way. Just
No.
worry.
That was something. You know, when you do something without really considering the consequences at all. So we were trying to promote the podcast with this PoliticsJOE podcast, which is actually less politics heavy usually than this podcast has been.
It's been today,
So
I
you
know.
get the flavour.
We didn't say it's all laugh. Right?
It's just some. But heavy on the sum today.
Yes.
So I could do it with my colleagues, Ollie, Dougmore, and Avis and Tina, and we were trying to think of ways to promo it. So we're doing like short, snappy clips. Ollie's was like, "Love podcast, hate nonsense. It's listen to the PoliticsJOE podcast," and I was like, "It'll be really funny if I just pretended my dad was Alastair because my surname's Campbell.
Aye.
It's just funny.
Yeah.
If,
And people, it's believable.
oh, definitely. And so. So I was like, my dad, Alastair Campbell, got me this job at PoliticsJOE, and now we've got a podcast. And people were incensed, absolutely incensed, because I suppose it speaks to like media nepotism, like lack of opportunities in journalism. People were furious. Alastair Campbell quoted it and said, "This is not true in the slightest." I don't know what. Really weird that he's done this, and you're like, but people now, like people come up.
Yeah.
Like,
Good for
people-
him to be so annoyed a bit of spin.
But he also
He's like a dodgy dossy.
that's not the worst thing you would have done either.
I know.
But people come up to my colleagues like, or ask friends of mine like, I didn't realise his dad was Alastair Campbell. And like, Campbell's just a common surname.
Yeah.
But I do wonder if this has inhibited my career because people are like, well, I'm not hiring Alastair Campbell's son.
Yeah.
He's not worked hard at anything.
No, I mean, if you know, you'd have probably been at a more mainstream establishment if you
actually.
were.
Maybe. I suppose being Alastair Campbell's child hasn't harmed other people in there.
This is
in
true.
their careers.
Yes. Some led to believe. I don't know, but no, that's interesting. And so, like I suppose. So, what's your favourite part? Because you obviously do they put you, Ava, and Ollie do the podcast there.
Yeah, it's good.
The pubcast, I should say.
Oh, it's not the podcast anymore.
Is it not?
Because
I seen these were arguing. Was there somebody else that's got that
someone's
name?
got the copyright. So they came into the office and were like, this guy come into the office and was like, I've got the copyright to the podcast. It was like at the beginning of a sitcom or something like that.
That's funny.
And so it's the PoliticsJOE podcast now, and like it's really good fun. It's just like the three of us discussing. it's become more absurd and more lore heavy. There's so many in-jokes or whatever that
And you
the
say
audience
that-
will know them better than anyone. Like it's
Yeah.
sometimes they comment below and you're like, what is that? It's like a deep cut to episode 3.
Totally.
Of like a one-off comment that someone made. Once, I love doing stuff. That's really good fun. In terms of stuff I like doing, I like making almost like short documentaries about political issues in the UK. I love meeting people around the country and doing just meeting interesting people, because people are far more interesting than they give themselves credit for, I think, and people are much more political than they are as well, just because you ask someone, what do you think about politics, or what do you think? I don't know anything about politics. But then you say, what do you think about the local council? And they're like, I'll tell you about the local council.
Yeah.
Like people are more interesting, stuff like that. And so you go to these things, like I was in Brighton a couple of weekends ago for this big there was this big protest called Surfers Against Sewage, basically about the dumping of sewage in kind of England's waterways.
Yeah.
And there's this woman who, as for the protest, had dressed up as if she was covered in used sanitary pads and shitty toilet paper and whatever. And first of all, that's really funny that you've done that. That is like that as like a bit of like, it's just funny. That is funny, but you're also making a really good point. So it's like a nice balance between like, people are funny and absurd, but I think that's my kind of meeting interesting people who are like doing, why are you doing this? Why are you doing this mad thing?
Yeah.
That you're doing. Why do you run a cannabis club in Teesside? What does that say about the UK? Why are you rallying for Tommy Robinson
Yeah.
on the day that he's acquitted from court? What are you doing? Like,
And that's great. I love all that, like John Ronson stuff and all that.
Yeah.
And it's like, but like what you guys do, like you're saying, like that woman, for example, is a great thing where you can extrapolate and say, as you say, what it says about the wider issue or what's going on in the country, and it's a great way into it for people because it's
Definitely.
entertaining and informative.
yeah,
you know?
that's what it is, because it's like that's what I love. Like, obviously, everyone loves John Ronson, Louis Theroux,
Yeah.
stuff like that. I interviewed John Ronson, and that was class. That was like just chatting to him about
Amazing.
journalism for an hour, and it's just, that's what I think it is I think people think journalism or news needs to be dry, needs to be just facts or something, but you can add some heart to it, and I think people really relate
Yeah.
to it.
Totally.
Because people remember so much of it is influenced by the journalist doing it. Even think like Jeremy Paxman, like all political interviews since the 90s have been Jeremy Paxman inspired, essentially.
Yeah.
Or Louis Theroux has been so influential to documentarians, and it's like a mix of entertainment, but you're learning something serious about the UK, and kind of like our instinct is, if something is a bit silly, almost like you might as well do it. You might as well, like, there was an anti-Sadiq Khan protest just for the London mayor elections, and there's a group there as an anti-ULEZ protest, and there's a group there called the ULEZettes, who were an all-female choir who rewrote popular songs to be against Sadiq Khan. So for the last bit, I was like, because they had this loudspeaker, and they sang one of the songs was, do you know the song "What Do You Think You're doing, Mr. Hitler"? So it was like, what do you think you're doing, Mr. Khan? And I was like, I don't want to participate in that one.
Yeah.
I don't think comparing Sadiq Khan to Adolf Hitler is maybe the one, but I did sing along with, maybe it's because I'm a Londoner. I hate Sadiq Khan. So just kind of stuff like that. It's like it's kind of really weak gonzo journalism kind of singing. Because then you're like, I think you get more empathy for these people, or you understand these people more if they're standing in Leicester Square singing their hearts out about Sadiq Khan. If you've done that as well, then you have a better understanding of their motivations.
And everyone talks about it so polarized and this and that the other day. But I think there is a temptation for everybody to see each other in terms of like, like a Ramonan or a Brexiteer or a Tory or a fucking whatever. And like, but when you meet these people and you realise everybody's, as a person, and you can have empathy, and I think empathy can go a long way to trying to heal our broken nation.
Because lots of people are sound. Lots of people are just nice.
Yeah,
you might be vehemently opposed to political views, but like, you can have a chat with them. Like,
absolutely.
If I couldn't have a chat with people, I would say 99.999% of people that I interview, I like. I've managed to build a rapport with them. I could imagine having a coffee with them or a pint, but even people I like vehemently disagree with. And people are like, how do you get people to say these things to you? And I'm polite and I listen. I think is it. I think people are like want to go over all guns blazing and try and catch these people out, but they're going to be really hostile to you.
Yeah.
They're not going to open up to you. But if I came up to you, I was like, oh, what do you think about this? But if I met you, I met you like 2 hours ago, and then so I came up to you like, what do you think about Scottish independence?
Yeah.
And then I was like having a chat with you about whatever, and then I was like, oh, Marc, like, anyway, as we were like, what do you've warmed up
You're more open to it.
slightly, yeah. I think that's maybe the trick to it.
Here's one question before we wrap up as well. Is do you ever meet people like that and they've got like these opposing views? Do you ever get the sense or just see that they don't really believe the things they stand for? Like, you know, I mean, obviously the classic examples you get these like, you know, the homophobic conservatives are, you know, closed to the door, or just somebody that like maybe they're playing to these like basically what Rishi Sunak's doing, and they're playing to all these kind of social issues to try and rile up support. But they probably, you know, if you sat and you had a chat with them like off the record, you'd get the feeling that they don't actually.
Yeah, I think that's the difference. I think the average person really believes it, really believes these kind of things, and the kind of political actor is more exploitative of it. I don't really think they have the convictions of it. You can see kind of like Boris Johnson's chameleon-like journey through politics of like being a very socially liberal mayor of London, whatever, to being to his prime ministership. I think it's cynical. I think people catch on to a tide or a wave or a strength of feeling. Even like lots of Conservative MPs or Conservative ministers campaigned against Brexit.
Yeah.
And now they have to, because that is the mood of the nation, they have to make it, there's like, oh, it was a great idea.
Yeah.
So a lot of cynicism, I think.
Yeah.
Which can be exploited.
Generally, and just everybody just kind of needs to say what they're meant to say. So before we let you go, Ed, I'd just like to ask, what's your prediction then for the election? What do you think is going to happen? It's Labour landslide. Do you get a number of seats in mind, or what do you think it's going to?
Labour.
Or have you got any general predictions for what might happen between now and the election?
Between now and the election,
what can we expect to see?
Oh, that's what Rishi Sunak is going to have a press conference outside a skip fire.
What do you think about that? Are they going to try and get one of these flights off, do you think, to Rwanda? Or can they not
I think no. I don't think they will. I don't think they've got. I actually think if they were going to be able to do it, they'd have put off the election until after it.
So they can.
I don't think they would do that. I think it's interesting because you couldn't predict it. It's just been such a mad 3 days already. It seems kind of futile to be like.
And already he's fucked up.
But also, like, if I try and say something funny, like, it'll be less funny than what.
I know that's what going to do. The fucking first day he went to Wales, and he's looking forward to the football and all that.
Yeah. I thought he got a fair. I thought that was actually an unfair criticism because, like,
they're still going to watch it.
Aye, I love the Euros. Like, it's not like you and I have like have avoided international tournaments for however long.
That's the first one I'm going to be watching since 1998.
I think like I'm going to say Labour, healthy majority, maybe not a landslide, as the poll. Maybe the polls will tighten. Yeah, it's kind of a rubbish hedging my bets answer.
Do you think they'll beat? Do you think they'll get more seats than SNP in Scotland?
Yes, I actually do think that. I think there'll be a mood of. I think if there's not enthusiasm for Starmer, there's also not really for Swinney.
Yes,
it's probably my assessment of that.
Yeah, and then. So see, and then for there, things can only get better.
Exactly. Sponsored by D Ream. This. Please welcome D Ream to the podcast.
Well, the thing I've always thought, and I think he's even said this, Professor Brian Cox, but you know his theory of entropy, that goes directly against the idea of things. Things can only get worse and more chaotic according to entropy.
God. This is his. He regrets being in that band.
So much misinformation. That's what I was. And well, listen, Ed, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a brilliant chat, man. I'm glad, and hopefully we can get you back when you're back up. We'd love to get you back on.
Definitely, I've enjoyed it.
Keep in touch. We'll maybe keep keep in touch and maybe get some contributions for you between now and the election. And as I say, the Some Laugh political correspondent, so we look forward to welcoming you back. Before we go, anything you'd like to plug? Obviously, you've got the Politics Joe podcast yourselves.
Yeah, but subscribe to Politics Joe on YouTube. Listen to the podcast, rate us. Well, if you like it, rate us. If you don't, ignore it. Yeah, just watch all our content. There's going to be a lot. We're going to be doing a podcast every working day of the election.
Excellent. Well, thank you for taking your day off to come and do this as well. And I would thoroughly recommend it. I really enjoy it as well. And it's worth checking out. Thanks a lot for joining us, mate. And as ever, you can like and subscribe on YouTube to Some Laugh. Please leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And you can follow us at Some Laugh Pod on Instagram, TikTok and Twitter. And send any questions you've got to the email address, which is somelaughpod@gmail.com. Thanks a lot for tuning in, guys. Hope you enjoyed it. And I'll speak to you very soon.